In trying to choose a favorite frame from the 2017 film Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, many come to mind. All the spider people huddling in a corner, Miles' face finally fitting the mask, and of course the leap of faith. But I think one that can often go overlooked is this: the first use of spider sense. And for a lot of people, the first time they've ever seen spider sense visualized. I don't know if it's the first time it's been visualized, but it's definitely the first time it's been visualized like this, and the first time that I remember. Throughout its history, spider sense ranges from simply a warning of a punch to what is basically Spider-Man's version of the Force. It's an additional power that adds to his incredibly strong and in many ways overpowered ability list. His powers would let him take over New York and exert his will on all the people there, but he doesn't, because with great power comes great responsibility. This is what makes him a compelling hero. He has so much power, and yet he chooses to do good, to do small good, to help the old woman cross the street, and to be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. But one Spider-Man notably doesn't have spider sense, and it's so important to show that he doesn't have it that it's shown in his introduction, the very first scene he's in. Let's talk about Miguel O'Hara, also known as Spider-Man 2099, also known as Spider-Man, doesn't have spider sense due to the nature of his power. Now, I'd like to note for the record that I have not read every Spider-Man 2099 comic ever created, just these. But it's important to note from the start that Miguel is not a villain in the comics, nor is he in this film. He's an antagonist, an important distinction that we'll clarify later. But before that, a note to all the 2099 fans who are angry that the most publicly known representation of one of your favorite comic characters is a misrepresentation of who they really are. Let it be known that my comic shelf looks like this. Welcome to the club. But I think a rough adaptation of a character isn't a good enough reason to write off the character in that adaptation. This version of Miguel is an incredibly interesting character in his own right, even if he isn't the version of the character you wish was a popular one. Once again, shelf. But taking a step back from my thoughts on the adaptation, let's take a look at the character, because to me, he's a perfect antagonist. Like squares and rectangles before them, antagonists and villains are similar, but not the same. An antagonist is a literary device where a villain is more of an archetype. A character in a piece of media can be one, both, or neither. Generally, an antagonist is the character that opposes your protagonist, by very definition. Think Wile E. Coyote. Wile's not technically a villain. He doesn't have evil intent, which is generally a prerequisite for a villain. Now, sometimes this distinction gets messy. For example, in Avengers Infinity War, Thanos is the villain. However, many, myself included, also view him as the protagonist of the film. He's the one with the goal who goes in, defeats his opposition, and succeeds. The story revolves around him and not the other way around. If you want more on this, there are plenty of videos on this topic. A lot of times, this distinction can be made by looking at motivation. In Across the Spider-Verse, there are two main antagonists, Miguel O'Hara and the Spot. Miguel's motivation is to protect the Spider-Verse. The Spot's motivation starts as being Spider-Man's new villain and ends up being the same but elevated times 1,000, with his new goal specifically being,
I'm gonna take everything from you.
While both these characters are antagonists, actively working against Miles, only one is a true villain at the start. Initially, Miguel's goals don't even contradict with Miles, at least not directly. However, by the actions of Gwen Stacy Spider-Woman, they do. But let's take a look at Miguel's motivations, because his motivations in this movie seem to be, don't let Miles save his dad. But in reality, it's much more complicated than that. Miguel's entire goal is to preserve the canon, but more specifically, it's to not let any more universes collapse. And if you ask me, that sounds like the goal of a hero, of a protagonist of their own story. Think back to Thanos saving, in the heaviest of quotes, the universe. If you want to write a great antagonist, they should be the protagonist of their own story. There's an alternate movie where Miguel O'Hara is the hero trying to stop Miles Morales' Spider-Man from collapsing the canon. And that's what this character of Miguel sees. From our outside the movie point of view, we see that Miguel is most likely wrong, and the stopping of the canon events probably doesn't mean that a universe will collapse. But Miguel doesn't have that perspective, and he isn't willing to participate in that theoretical and quite risky trolley problem. He watched, and from his point of view participated in, the death of one universe, and is now refusing to let it even possibly happen to another. To him, he's a savior. He has his great power, and now he has found his great responsibility. Spider-Man inherently holds an insane amount of guilt. It's one of the things that keeps him going at all times, the feeling that they could have done more. Peter Parker has his Uncle Ben that he let die. Miles has his Uncle Aaron. Gwen has her Peter, and they all have even more than that throughout the Spider-Man mythos. The part that makes them interesting characters are their responses to it, and how they take on the idea of great responsibility. And Miguel's response is one that we haven't seen a Spider-Man take. He lost his daughter twice, and in trying to reach her again, he maybe caused the universe to collapse. So he takes it upon himself that no universe should ever have to collapse again. Because from his point of view, it's his fault that the first one did. And that's what makes him so interesting. Because from his point of view, he is completely right. He's just taking it to a higher degree where now he's letting other people die. He's using smaller tragedies in the name of preventing the biggest tragedy all across. A common complaint in the wake of Across the Spider-Verse is, but it doesn't make sense that X-Spider-Person would go along with Miguel's plan, most commonly pointed at Spectacular Spider-Man. And to that I say, doesn't it? Let's take Gwen as an example. In the lead up to her going with Miguel, she 1. Accidentally killed her best friend, 2. Will probably never get to see the first friend she made after that ever again, and 3. Revealed her identity to her father, who immediately tried to arrest her, if not more. Put plainly, she's probably not in the best place mentally. She said it herself,
I don't know how to fix this.
now she's told that all of that was destined to happen because of a massive canon put in place and that none of it was her fault. And she's finally been handed a reason to why her life sucks so much. It isn't her fault. She doesn't have to fix this. Of course she's going to go for it. Of course they all are. Getting told it's not your fault, your life sucks, it was all just predetermined, here are a whole bunch of other people who are just like you, will 100% get people to join up with something. Don't believe me? Calvinism, also called Reformed Christianity, is a major branch of the Spider Society finds people who are at their lowest and tells them it isn't their fault, and it continues to spread and people continue to join. Now, I'll admit, my reasoning does get a bit rocky when it comes to Paviter Spider-Man, because he seems to know of Spider Society and maybe be involved while his canon events haven't happened yet. But he doesn't seem to know about canon events from what we see. They may just be more selective when it comes to who knows about the canon versus who knows about Spider Society as a whole. At the start of this video, I mentioned how picking a favorite frame of Into the Spider-Verse is incredibly difficult, but picking a favorite from Across the Spider-Verse is arguably harder. But let me tell you, this frame is so in the running. This right here is the exact moment where Peter B. Parker goes, oh, I think I might be on the wrong side here. It's the
We are supposed to be the good guys.
where the other Spider people are maybe starting to question all of this. It's the exact moment where Miguel becomes the villain of Miles' story. Now, Hobie got here faster than everybody else, but you know, people do things at their own rate. This is not the moment where Miguel starts actively trying to cause the death of Miles' father, but it is the moment where he starts trying to prevent anyone from stopping it. So, in a way, he still is trying to cause Miles' father to die. This is the part where everyone sees what is really happening and what someone who hasn't yet gone through this level of tragedy and knows it's going to happen will do to stop it. They see Miles doing everything he can to prevent his father's death, because with great power comes great responsibility. It's the core of the Spider-Man ethos. It's why Spider-Bite, dope name, lets him go. Because she realizes that if it were her, she would want him to do the same. It's her leap of faith. It's the lack of spider sense throughout the entire sequence of Miles going home. He isn't a threat. And I checked, she does have spider sense. Spider sense is weird. It ranges from look out to detecting that the Green Goblin is back in control over Norman Osborn. But Miguel doesn't have it. He doesn't know where the danger is coming from, and so he has to figure out for himself. He has to guess, and he is terrified that he'll guess wrong. So he hunts a child in order to make sure his father dies. Miguel O'Hara is scared, terrified that if he doesn't act, another universe will die, and by him not acting, he might as well cause the universe's death himself. It's the burden of Spider-Man.
Look, when you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you.
Miguel O'Hara is Spider-Man, but he's the Spider-Man who's confused about his great responsibility, because while he's trying to protect the Spider-Verse, he isn't quite sure about who he's protecting it from. And that's where I think he's going next. I'd put my money on it. He starts out Beyond as a villain before he realizes that if the Spot continues, there will be no Spider-Verse. The Spot will realize how many Spider-Men there are and try to kill all of them. Miguel will realize that he's been interpreting his great responsibility wrong this entire time. And also Silka's going to be there. I promise. Maybe. Thanks for watching.